Hi, Taylor from Doomed to Fail. Today we'll be releasing episode 7, part 1, which is on Oscar Wilde and his boyfriend, Lord Alfred Douglas. It's super interesting. Oscar Wilde really kind of dug his own grave at the end, but before that, he had a pretty exciting life for the times, and we definitely know a ton about him, and it's an interesting story. I'm also going to post some things on Instagram. He is just an incredible figure for Midjourney and creating AI art. So check that out on our Instagram at Doomed to Fail Pod, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to Doomed to Fail, the podcast where we switch up the premise of the show unexpectedly, as is what I'll be doing later today. I'm Fars, joined here by my co-host, Taylor. Hi, Taylor.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. Are we recording at the normal time?
We are. It is the morning. It's very bright in your office. That's delightful. I at work this week, I was like 8:30 meetings are really rough for me because I don't like the mornings. Like the mornings are dumb. I hate them. I will never wake up early, but I do get up early for this. So I guess it's just perspective.
And I did not change the timing on this at all, or the day, or anything. So
Woohoo.
kudos to me.
Congratulations. Thank you.
So let's go ahead and start by discussing what you would like to be drinking today, or will be drinking.
Cool. So I know for your story, I don't know what it is yet, but for your story, we'll be reminding everybody to hydrate and just drinking water. So make sure to have your water. I have my water and my coffee. Faraz has his water and his Diet Coke, so we're ready to go. And then for my story that I'll jump into first is I have a quote from one of our subjects or participants or whatever, and it is alcohol taken in sufficient quantities may produce all the effects of drunkenness. So
Who would have
it's just like
thought?
a posh drinking some drinks is what we're is the drink in general, because today I'm going to talk about Oscar Wilde and his boyfriend Lord Alfred Douglas, who goes by the name Bosie. So
Lovely.
tell you more about their story.
I
So
do not know very much about Oscar Wilde, so if you ask me about movies that he was in, I probably won't know them.
well, he was in no movies because he's a playwright from the 1800s.
I mean, like movies about him, obviously.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I knew that much at least.
Um, we'll get to it. I think there's some that you might recognize if maybe you haven't read or seen. So we'll get there. I did a lot of research this week, just like watching movies, like you said, and listening to some podcasts. I watched a documentary called The Importance of Being Oscar from the BBC. I watched the film Wilde. It's from the 90s about Oscar Wilde. Stephen Fry plays him, and Jude Law actually plays Lord Alfred Douglas. And this is the second movie that we've brought up where Jude Law plays like the young gay lover of an older man.
What
Because
was
he
the
also
first?
did in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil.
Oh, okay.
So that was Jude Law's kind of genre, 20 years ago or so. I also listened to a great Oxford lecture that I found. It's by a woman named Dr. Sauce Eltis. Her name's SOS. I have no idea how to pronounce that, but Oxford University records their lectures and you can just listen to them as a podcast. So the audio was pretty terrible because I think it was like just a microphone like pinned to her while she was actually doing her class. And one of the episodes, I think she had like a brooch on or something. You could like hear it hitting the brooch, and someone was coughing the entire time. So you're like, oh my God, go home. Do not cough for this entire lecture. But still, it was delightful, and I learned a lot. So
So how many movies and books and podcasts in total were part of your research?
I watched 2 movies and listened to about 5 hours of a podcast.
Thorough,
Thank you.
very thorough.
Yes, it's been a very posh week for me.
I know you're
It's
listening
very,
to Oxford lectures, like you're like elevating us a little bit.
yeah, it's been difficult not to speak in an English accent to my family and friends, so I will try to not do that as well here, but I've been listening to it a lot. So
You don't want to try to do the whole section, your section in a British accent?
no, I don't think I'm ready for that.
Okay.
Maybe next time. Maybe next time.
Yes. Yes.
So, this story appeals to me the way that the Eleanor Roosevelt story did when we talk about living a full life and really living the shit out of your life. In this story, Oscar Wilde lived a rich life. I say the word velvet a lot. It reminds me of this idea of like waking up late because I hate the mornings and being an artist and throwing a fit and writing all your feelings and then eating a great meal and staying up late, drinking and talking and smoking and then yelling about art and then meeting life and then doing it all again. So just like this idea that you're just like in this world of just like artists and art and you're writing poetry and you're writing these plays and things like that. And it seems like, really fun to be able to choose what you want to do, even though like he did have obviously working as a writer. And I also feel like I have context to what this looks like because we're in like the late 1800s and like the Victorian era. And I know what that looks like. Like that's kind of an aesthetic that I like. I want to paint all my walls black and like, um, have that look, going on in my own home. So it's something that I can really see. And I feel like that I couldn't really see everything in the Taj Mahal story because I just like don't know what day-to-day life was like then. But I feel like I know what day-to-day life was for this. So I feel like it's easier for me to talk about, if that makes sense.
I keep picturing Hogwarts,
Yeah, picture
like
Hogwarts.
libraries with like rich oak and stuff like that.
Exactly. That you can totally picture Hogwarts or doing this. So it's very posh. Everything I'm talking about is very, very posh. So I'm going to talk about the people, some of the stories they told, some of the things that they wrote, and then the bad things that happened to them. So there are a couple of bad things do happen to the people in this story. So Oscar Wilde was born, and this is actually where I thought maybe I could flip into an Irish accent, but I'm not. Maybe I maybe won't. But his name was Oscar Finnegal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde. Oh, I don't know. It's a lot. It's very Irish. He was born in Dublin on the 16th of October, 1854. His parents were super interested in keeping him educated. He had a tutor until he was, pretty grown, and then he went to Trinity College in Dublin, and then he went to Oxford. So to cut to the chase and kind of spoil the story, another quote from Oscar Wilde is, "The two great turning points in my life were when my father sent me to Oxford and when society sent me to prison." So it's a big turning point in his life when he gets to go over to England, go to Oxford. He's a little bit of an outcast in the UK because he's Irish, but he gets along and he's fine. While in school at Oxford and at Trinity College, he's already making waves as a poet. So he was known for being lavish in like the right way, a lot of velvet, decorating his rooms with peacock feathers. He held lavish parties. He dated a woman who ended up leaving him for Bram Stoker, which is fun.
That's I mean, if you're gonna get left for anyone, that's okay. I could live with that.
I know. So kind of delightful. And so he's like, here's what I'm thinking. And this is just me, trying to learn in 7 hours this week what people study their whole lives. But he's like, my impression of Oscar Wilde is that he is half posh. So he's, for this time when he's in college and the rest of his life, he's going to be part of like the poshest and most fancy part of the British society. And that's what all of his plays are about. His plays and poetry are funny, and posh people thought they were funny too. So it was like making fun of them without them knowing. And I think that is the key to like ingraining yourself into like a really rich, posh group. He can get in and use their things, and go to their summer houses and take the clever things, but leave the boring ones. And I think that's kind of something that he was able to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Like you're kind of describing Philip Seymour Hoffman in
Yeah.
oh god, I forgot his name. Truman Capote movie that he did, where he just kind of can find his way to mingle in different high culture and counterculture groups and fit in wherever he wants to.
Yeah, I would say that Oscar Wilde's a little more like personable than Truman Capote, but yes, it's like the same idea. That makes sense. And I definitely feel this way too. Like I know people in my life who are like very, rich and, went to Harvard and, all that. And I don't really fit in with them. You can tell that I don't fit in with them, even though I like try to, and I'm not like any worse than they are. I just isn't the same. And I feel like I can tell when someone's like a real old money that like we're different.
Yeah. Yeah. I would imagine if we were to hang out with the Kennedys, we'd stand out.
Exactly. They'd know.
Yeah.
So exactly. But he's in there. He's already, writing, and he's making money, and he kind of already becomes a caricature of himself. There's a lot of cartoons, like comics of him, like drawings and like papers and things, which is I guess because they weren't like publishing photographs so in the papers, so they used to draw people, but a lot of like exaggerated cartoons of him. He had this like long brown hair. He was very tall, and he had this like these full lips and this long face, and so he's easy to draw, and to like characterize. Are you looking him up?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, good.
I was actually
So
looking up his IQ first, and then I couldn't find anything because they don't
that's
have IQ
hilarious.
tests back then. Yeah, he kind of looks like Snape.
A little bit. Wow, you're real going full Hogwarts. I like it.
So there's
He has
a
Snape hair.
the new Hogwarts game was just
Hmm.
released yesterday. It's called, or sorry, the Harry Potter game is called Hogwarts Legacy, and I've
Hmm.
been watching the gameplay, and I'm like, I'm definitely gonna get it. It just hasn't dropped for Xbox One yet, so I don't know. I'll probably cut this out because it's totally irrelevant to anything. But that's why I'm thinking about Harry Potter so much.
No, totally. Yeah, I heard about it too. I heard that it was coming out, so I hope it's fun. It sounds fun.
I think it'll be.
So, yeah, so you can continue to think he kind of looks like Snape, a little kinder, I imagine, kinder eyes than Snape's eyes, but looks a little bit like Snape with that hair. And there's already, a play that's written that's sort of a satire of him, and he gets invited to come to America to promote it. So he's like part of the zeitgeist. So he travels to America to promote this play, and then ends up going back to the UK and just continues to be a writer. Okay. Anyway, during this time, after college, while he's like in his 20s, he marries a woman named Constance Lloyd in 1884. And they have two sons, and he continues to just like write and hang out. So it sounds like him and Constance loved each other. They had their two kids, they took good care of them, they took good care of each other. Unfortunately, the problem with their marriage was that Oscar Wilde is gay. He was gay. He wasn't going to be, happy in a marriage because to a woman because he was a gay man. And so he
But she,
starts
but she knew, right? Like she knew that she was the beard.
I don't know if she knew. She like
Okay.
she found out later, obviously, but immediately I don't think that she knew. That wasn't like the deal. The
Right.
deal,
Okay.
yeah, it wasn't like let's get married and you can do whatever you want. It was like let's get married because I love you and let's have a family. And then he just couldn't continue that.
Yep. That's rough.
Yeah. So a couple friends of his, one friend that we'll mention briefly is a friend named Robbie Ross, and he was played by Michael Sheen in the movie, in the Wild movie, and he did a great job. And this was his first physical relationship with a man. So he's someone who will be in his life kind of on and off forever, but he does have a couple like relationships with men sort of to start, but Robbie Ross was his first. And he was a Canadian man who was in the UK. He inherited a lot of money and so just was able to like kind of hang out and be a part of Oscar Wilde's life. So I know I did an agenda at the beginning of this or whatever, laid out what we were going to talk about, but I want to talk about Oscar's work and him as like a man in this time and in general. So some of the things that are famous that you may have heard of is The Importance of Being Earnest. Have you seen that? Heard that?
It,
Read that?
is that a
It's a
book
play.
or it's
Is
a
it,
play?
it
No, I
yeah.
haven't.
A book is The Portrait of Dorian Gray. Do you remember that one?
That I do. Yeah.
Okay. So there's that. He did a couple other, I mean, he did a ton of stuff, but some of the other famous ones are Lady Windermere's Fan, Salome, and A Woman of No Importance. Those are some of the big ones. The Portrait of Dorian Gray, if read through it with a, a lens, you can see it as like a homosexual love story between an older man and a younger man. So in the Portrait of Dorian Gray, this man paints a painting of Dorian Gray, and the painting continues to get older and more decrepit as Dorian does, bad things and lives his life, but he doesn't get older. So that's the basic of that story. So some of the themes from Oscar Wilde's work, and this is what I was getting from that lecture, the Oxford lecture, is not judging people, because a theme of the time was judging fallen women. Everyone loved that. This woman is pregnant out of wedlock. This woman, is leaving her husband, and people loved to see those kind of like melodramatic tragedies on stage. And he really wanted to flip it and say, judgments are a form of control. I think we've talked about that before with like marriage being a form of control
Yeah.
and things like that. So judging women or anyone in that way is a way of controlling them. And so he wants to challenge that in his work. So in his work, one thing the characters do that they're allowed to do is change. And a big tenet of Oscar Wilde's life is you can be something different in each moment, and that's okay. And people don't let people judge you because you're constantly changing and constantly evolving. And one of his things that he also said was the most fundamental human right is to be an individual. So that means there's no truth to who you are because you're always changing, but that's also a good thing. That's part of his tenet.
It's very cool. I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I want to think about Oscar Wilde as like he's like indulgence. He's, writing these plays. He gets kind of fat. He spends his money on fancy things. So that's fun. Good for him. And this is a time where being gay is illegal. So, like we talked about before, there's always been gay people, and it goes, in and out of legality. But right now, it's actually illegal to be gay in the UK. And if I was talking about this for like days and days, I would talk more about there's like these like young men sex workers called rent boys, and it's exactly what you sound like. You can do that in the movie Wild. One of them is played by Orlando Bloom. He's in there for like 4 seconds. It was his first movie, but he just kind of like winks at Oscar Wilde and like walks away. So it's a little like flirtation thing. It's quite cute. So there's secret places for gay men to get together. If you want to know, if you want to be a gay man, it's easy. It's plenty, it's available. It's just like not, technically allowed. And so that means a lot of challenges for Oscar Wilde and people at this time, a lot of persecution, a lot of stigma. And he, used his writing to start to challenge some of those societal norms and express love like in different ways. Okay. So that's a little bit about his writing, about like who he is as a person. So we're still in Hogwarts. He looks like Snape. Very lush, very posh. So just to kind of tie up Constance, so poor Constance, she does die later in the story, so we won't come back to her, but but their relationship isn't the one that was doomed to fail. Like even though it was, but like that's not what I'm talking about in the story. But like of course that was never going to work out because he was gay. They never got divorced, but she did end up passing away really young. She was only 40. She probably had MS, but they didn't know what that was then. So she just had a lot of pain, and they did all these surgeries to figure it out. But like surgery in 1890 was like open it up and around and like see what's going on in there. So it wasn't great, and she died from complications of one of those surgeries, unfortunately, when she was pretty young because she was 40 and I'm 40, so I'm saying that's young to die.
So this is we're still like mid 1800s, right?
Late 1800s. This whole thing is like
Okay.
the late 1800s. Yeah.
Yeah, so surgery is still basically butchery.
Yeah, like no one's washing their hands. There's, blood everywhere. Yeah, exactly. The guy's probably also a butcher. He like
Or
does that too. It's in the back.
or,
Yeah,
or
so
barber.
yeah. Ugh, that sounds like a terrible way to go. So poor thing. But here's the relationship that was doomed to fail. So this is his Oscar Wilde's relationship with Lord Alfred Douglas, who goes by Bosie. And Bosie is a nickname he got when he was a kid, and it's from his mom calling him Boise because he was a boy and then turned into like Bosie. And he was like his mom's golden child, which I get because I call Miles my greatest joy, my favorite boy, and like stuff like that all the time. So I get it. That's fair. So in 1891, Wilde meets him, and Boise himself was born in 1870. So time to do some math. When they meet in 1891, Bosie is 21 and Oscar is 37. So this is something that I looked up how to tactfully address because I know that we like those age gaps are a big thing that we talk about a lot. So there's a thing that Wilde talks about, that there's a great love between an older man and a younger man that's like ancient, like Plato and Shakespeare was talking about it. So that's like a big thing that he, talks about love between, different types of people. And so I'm not going to get into that any more than that. It's not illegal, so fine. So the age range,
It feels different for some reason.
I know, I think so too, but I'm like, I don't know why. And
I don't know why either.
it just make us assholes? I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah. So I'm like,
maybe
I don't know.
it's a male relationship thing, or it could be the time in which the relationship. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
we are assholes.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be that. I really don't know. But that's what it is. What it is. It's not illegal, the age gap, but being gay is illegal at this time. So there's that happening with their relationship. So when they meet, it's very passionate. Bosie introduces him to the idea of rent boys. So like they like, see other people, they like go to sex parties and kind of giving into your kind of sexual desire. And Boisie's from a very posh line of, minor royalty, and his dad's is the Marquess of Queensberry, which is a very fancy name for your dad to have. And his family history includes lots of people dying by suicide and lots of people converting to Catholicism. So they're like not mentally stable in his family. And so right now, Boise is the golden boy around town. Their affair is very passionate. There's lots of love letters and poems. Bosie's a writer as well, but not as good. He's just like a rich guy who's a writer. So he's in there. And it sounds like Oscar was more involved in the relationship, and Bosie loves him, but it's also like never really going to commit to him. Meanwhile, so they kind of live together in like a country house in different places. And, Oscar's still married, but he spends all of his time with Bosie. And Bosie's dad, the Marquess of Queensberry, and Marquess is Marquess, which is a British nobleman ranking above an earl and below a duke.
Still don't know what that means. I like
So
how you
dumb.
tried to define it, and it's
I
still
know. Whatever. So he's like minor, whatever. And so the Marquess of Queensberry is pissed that he sees his son in this relationship with Oscar Wilde. And he's suspicious that they're more than friends, and he's just like really, really mad. And so he's kind of following his son around, yelling at him, telling him that he cannot be in this relationship. Everyone's denying it and yelling. And then he tries to get into this club to like heckle Oscar Wilde and Bosie because he knows that they're there. And he doesn't get let in, but he leaves a calling card. So like a calling card is like, your name on it, you leave a note or whatever. So this is spelled incorrectly, but he writes on his calling card for Oscar Wilde posing sodomite. So he spelled sodomite wrong, but essentially he's saying like, give this to the gay man in there. It's Oscar Wilde, I know he's gay, and giving it to the guards. And instead of Wilde being like, this man is a crazy person, who cares? He sues him for libel. So Oscar Wilde sues his boyfriend's dad for libel for calling him gay publicly. So he really like didn't need to do that, but he like, they ended up going to trial. So it goes to trial on April 3rd, 1895, and he is framed as an older man who grooms younger men. And eventually Wilde drops his libel claim because they're like, what are you talking about? We have all these witnesses. Like so many people know you're gay. So they're
yeah.
willing
It's only libel or slander if it's not true.
right.
So why put
Exactly.
yourself out there? That seems like a real
It's a bad move.
yeah, it was a bad move.
Yeah. He didn't need to do that. So he did that, and then he loses all of his money because he has to like pay all these court fees and all these things. And his friends are like, you should leave. Like just leave the UK, leave for a few years, go to Paris, like whatever, like just get out of here for a little bit. But he doesn't want to. He wants to stay. His sons are there. Like he doesn't want to leave yet. And he was like, I've made my bed. Like I need to stay here. So now everyone knows that now everyone, not just the people in the know that he is gay. And so he gets charged with gross indecency, which is part of the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1885, which is an act to make further provision for the protection of women and girls, the suppression of brothels, and other purposes. So it's basically like the don't be gay or anything that people would think as, I don't know, sleazy law.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, he's still, he's all his posh people love him, but they also are the ones who are like making these laws. So it's pretty, hypocritical of them to be like, you're gonna, like, you have to, be charged for this, even though we like adore you and don't really care. So he does get charged. He's sentenced to 2 years of hard labor. So he goes to like a hard labor prison, and it's awful. And he, goes there, and while he's in prison, his mom passes away, all this sad stuff happens. He's not allowed to write like plays or poetry or anything, but he can write letters. So he writes this like really, really long letter to Bosie called De Profundis, which is from the depths, and it's half a love letter to him and half a letter to the way that he lived his entire life. So it's a little bit of like, it's like its own kind of novella, and it's something that gets published after he dies. That's awful, especially going to prison for being gay. Like that's not okay. And even though we had all of that, it is also worth noting that, he inspired people to think differently about love, kind of ongoing. He became kind of a caricature of a gay man, which probably isn't what he wanted, but at least, he's sort of at the forefront of getting it out there at this time. And
What I was thinking was, I know that none of this is actually true, but in theory, jail is supposed to be rehabilitative,
Hmm.
right? So was the assumption 2 years is how long it takes to not be gay anymore, or like was it just supposed to be like a constant recurring theme of just throwing someone in jail for being gay?
Yeah, I don't know if they were like thinking about like conversion therapy. I think they were just like 2 years of hard labor for that. And I don't think there was like a on-staff psychiatrist. I doubt there was a doctor,
Yeah.
like it was just not great. So he does get out of prison and he goes to Italy and finds Bosie there. They spend a few months together, but Oscar's very weak, and I don't think Bosie wants to deal with it. Like he just doesn't want to take care of him. In the movie, they have a scene even before this where Oscar's like just has the flu and Bosie doesn't want to take care of him because he's kind of a brat, even though he
He's a
like loves
kid.
him. Yeah, he's a kid, exactly. So they they break up. Oscar kind of lives in Paris for the rest of his life. He dies on November 30th, 1900, at the age of 46. So he dies of meningitis, and he's buried in Paris. Bosie actually lives until 1945. So he lives for, 45 more years. He converts to Catholicism, gets married, and has a kid. He just kind of sucks. Like I think he's just kind of doing whatever,
Yeah.
you
Can
know.
I,
So
can I throw out a casting idea for Bosie?
yeah.
Ryan Felipe.
Yeah, totally. And that, I mean, Ryan Fleetwood looks just like Jude Law in the 90s.
Actually, you're right. They do kind of look the same.
So yes,
Wouldn't have been that big of a difference.
that's exactly right. I think people got them confused all the time. But maybe I know Ryan Felipe and Reese Witherspoon's son is like 20 now. Maybe he can do it
There you go.
if they do it again. And then so that's the sad story. That's Oscar and the man he loved and the man's father who sent him to jail and all these things. Some news: homosexuality was decriminalized in England and Wales in 1967, so no longer legal. And in 2017, Oscar Wilde was among an estimated 50,000 men who were pardoned for homosexual acts that were no longer considered offenses under the Policing and Crime Act of 2017. So they that law essentially put 50,000 men in jail, and 100 years later, they all get pardoned because it's no longer criminal.
You said 67.
Yeah, 1967.
That's yeah. So that's a little bit ahead of the curve. So the
Yeah,
U.S. the Stonewall Uprising happened in '69.
yeah,
So good for them.
yeah, totally. That's it.
That's it.
That's all I got.
Hey, so question for you. It
Hmm.
like having done the research you did and the reading that you did, if you were to point to a specific thing to look at or read or whatever to basically get the condensed version of Oscar Wilde as like a human, as a philosopher, I think maybe even,
Hmm.
what would you point to? I already
I would
know
say,
the story of Dorian Gray. Just curious, like if there's anything else out there.
I mean, I would honestly watch the movie, the Wild movie. It's on Amazon. You can rent it. The one with Jude Law. It's
Okay,
it's pretty good, and it's Wilde. And I'll put a link in the thing. But I thought I did a great job of sort of
nice.
just kind of, and Stephen Fry, the actor, did a great job playing him. He really looks like him. You just like kind of get this idea that he's like this like big presence, around town. And did you see the like unfortunate? There are also, in the movie and in real life, there were other men who loved Oscar, like that like Robbie Ross, who would have just been, in love with him his whole life, but he fell for the like golden boy around town, and that was his downfall.
In one of the pictures of them together, it links to an article. It says Lord Alfred Douglas, the man who destroyed Oscar Wilde. So not a good way to be remembered, I guess.
No, no, he didn't. It was like I don't even know if it was really his fault, much as it was his dad's fault for like bringing it up and like making it a big thing. And they could have just had like a rocky, passionate love affair their whole lives, but it had, unfortunately, they got the court involved. And I don't know why um Oscar Wilde would be like, that's libel. Why you'd even like stir
Why
the
would
pot like
you?
that?
Yeah, just let it die. Just,
Yeah, just be like, okay, that guy's nuts. He spelled it wrong. Like he doesn't know what he's talking about, and then move on, rather than, going to court and having, maids be like, he's always sneaking dudes up to his room, things like that. You're like, why? Why bring it up? But
apparently, Alfred Douglas was also quote unquote a virulent racist.
oh,
So, amongst
that
other
that, that,
things.
that doesn't come up in the movie, but color me surprised because
Yeah.
probably that makes sense.
Um, Great, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm gonna give that movie a whirl. I've always heard the name Oscar Wilde because I consume a lot of the media that he had some influence on. It never got deep into like who he was as a person, but he sounds pretty fascinating as a
Yeah,
philosopher in particular.
yeah, very fun.
Um, so I'm going to segue into the true crime side of the equation for today.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any suggestions for other episodes, please let us know. We're at Doomed to Fail Pod on all of social media at doomedtofailpod@gmail.com. And we love suggestions and feedback and all the things. So thank you for listening. As a reminder, we are putting out our first 26 episodes. We're dividing them in half, putting them out on Fridays in small bites. But if you do want to go back and listen to part 2 of episode 7, you can do that now. Just go scroll back all the way back to episode 7 and you'll get the whole long one. But then we'll re-release it on its own next Friday. I think that's all I got. Thank you so much.